Kashif Khan, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Founder of the DNA Co. You've written a book. I think there might even be a movie in the offing as well. Let's start right at the very beginning with you. I know I've read lots about you, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. You had health issues. Talk me briefly through the health issues and what led you to start really trying to learn more about DNA.
I was sick. So first of all, I had never been sick prior to that. I was fine, typical good health. And so I got eczema to the point where I couldn't open my left eye. I had psoriasis to the point where if I would have crasped my knuckles into like a fist, they would bleed,
Mm.
right? Horrible migraines, which was the worst part. I would be vomiting literally from the pain and then just sleeping for a day or two. Depression and gut issues. So all these things happened to me when I was 38 years old. And my question to my clinicians was, why? What did I do wrong? What did I eat wrong? Am I exposed to something? And that was my first go around in the healthcare system, and where I learned that we don't do that here. We don't ask why. We tell you what. Here's what this thing is called, and here's the pill you have to take. So I had five different doctors, five different pills,
Mm.
and I didn't think that made any sense. It was just illogical. So I started to dive into functional integrative medicine and learning how my body actually worked for the first time ever. My father passed away when I was 17 from multiple chronic conditions. And I remembered I had promised to myself that would never happen to me. So I renewed that promise. And I started to learn and investigate. And I found that ultimately, genetically, there were some problems. And there were certain pages of this human instruction manual that tells all your cells how to do their jobs that they were just missing. I was missing some key, very important genes. And as an example, there's a very important gene around detoxification, meaning clearing toxins that enter your body from the bloodstream so that they don't cause inflammation. I'm missing that gene. It's not even about what version, what I don't even have it. My office was sitting right above a manufacturing company that was putting pollutants into the airways that I was breathing for 7, 8, 10 hours a day. My business partner wasn't sick because he has an extra copy of the gene that I was entirely missing.
Hmm.
So that, in a nutshell, is like what happened to me. And there's so much more. We can keep going.
What business were you in then? You and your business partner. What part of DNA and functional medicine were you operating in right then?
Well, I ran a marketing PR and marketing company where we helped technology companies grow startups. So Toronto, where I'm based, has a huge startup scene. It's like a Silicon Valley type place because of a couple of universities we have, and so I was really good at figuring out with these companies what they needed to make them work, and then helping them with media and with marketing and all these things. And so when this happened, I was so impacted by I fixed myself. I got my arthritic mother out of bed and going to the gym. I got my anxiety laden niece who ran away from home thriving as a straight A student. I said, this is legacy. This is like meaning. This is purpose. And I went to my business partner, handed him the keys. I said, you keep this company. I found what I have to work on. And I never looked back since then.
Okay, it's a huge leap. We haven't got massive time, but how do you make the leap from making all of these important discoveries? You knew that the DNA, your DNA had the keys to
Yeah.
unlock some of these issues. How do you then begin setting up a company that can deliver this on a wider scale to people around Toronto, Canada,
Yeah.
USA, and now the world? And I suppose there'll be people questioning, does how can this be so? How do we find out so much from a swab of our
Yeah.
saliva that can then cure everything from your eczema to your granny's arthritis to your niece's concentration issues and period problems or whatever they might have been?
Well, the answer is actually in my own genome. So I'm genetically wired one step away from a psychopath, which is why I decided
What is that
a,
gene, please?
a healthy psychopath, which drove me to make the decision I made. And what does that profile look like? And this will answer all your questions in one answer.
Yeah.
Dopamine is a chemical that allows you to feel pleasure, right? And the way my brain does that looks like this. The receptors in the brain that bind dopamine, and there's genes that drive this. This is why we can understand this. I have the least possible density. So when there is pleasure or reward meaning I achieve something at work, because dopamine powers both of those things,
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard for me to feel. Then there's a gene called MAO, which breaks the dopamine up to get you ready to go back to normal. I have the fastest possible MAO. Then there's COMT, which is a protein that clears that broken up metabolite, and I have the fastest possible COMT. So I feel it way down here, and it's done before it even started. That leads me to one of three outcomes: depression, because the world sucks and I don't get to feel good; addiction, because I find something that gives me pleasure and I keep doing it and doing it. And it's never enough, right? I can't get no satisfaction.
Hmm.
Or achievement, because dopamine also powers reward, and you don't need both. You don't need pleasure and reward. You just need one. You need satisfaction from either source. So guess what? I've experienced all three of these things in different parts of my life, in different contexts, when different things were happening. In this context, where I got that sense of reward of healing myself and healing my mother and healing my niece and starting to heal my friends, and then realizing, wow, I can do work that's so purposeful. I, as a borderline psychopath, gave my company to my partner and said, I'm going to invest in the funding and research of this, and I'm going to make this available to everybody. And so I brought in the scientists and the clinicians, and they were sitting on my dining room table building algorithms of how do we interpret this stuff better. We spent 3 years studying 7,000 people one by one, because as a outsider, and I think this was the big blessing, I wasn't a scientist and I wasn't a doctor. So I could see what I needed. Here's what I want this tool to look like. Here's the information I need from it. I'm not concerned with what your academic lecture looks like. Here's what it needs to do for me. And so that's what the team built,
Mm.
is this ultimate tool that is exactly what I wished I had when I was sick. And I think it required that happening, somebody from the outside coming in and taking all this brilliant science and reassembling it into a tool that's usable.
In my experience, on my sort of healing journey that's been over the past 2 or 3 years, the people that I'm most inspired by are people like you who have had to face something head on and they have found the solutions. Those people, in my experience, those doctors, those clinicians, those healers, they are the people that I put my trust most in because they have this lived experience. They've gone through it and they know what's required from a patient perspective because they've been the patient.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing with all great functional medicine stories or root cause medicine. The person who is the most brilliant at it usually went through it themselves. So they had to discover the answer that didn't exist. Here's my textbook, here's what I was taught in school. It's not working. I need more. And they have to go find it. And then all of a sudden they feel like they need to scream it out so that everybody else has it too. And there's this drive inside you, this fire in your gut that it's not going to end until the whole world knows.
I think there's
Yeah.
there's there's a quote, I can't remember it verbatim, but there's an Einstein quote which says it's not about the question, it's not about what the question is, it's about what the answer is. Question the answer.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
All right. What makes the DNA company, and this isn't an advert for the DNA company, I'm just fascinated. There are a lot of companies out there right now who profess to be offering this kind of service. Send in your
Right.
saliva and we will give you. Most people are interested in their heritage. Where did they come from? That was very, very popular for a while. What makes your analysis stand out, and how do we all watch out for the not so honest players out there?
Yeah, so genetics is where things are rooted in. Genetics is this gene means this gene means this gene means this. And that's why you only ever get outcomes of you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, good luck. You have a 60% chance of breast cancer, good luck. What do you do with that information? You spend the next 30 years in anxiety waiting to see what's coming,
Yeah.
right? Versus if I'm telling you you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, I'm also telling you you have a 20% chance of not getting it. What were those people doing right that they didn't get it? That their genome was pointing them towards it, but they didn't get it. The exact same genetic code. So, what we did in this research model, we didn't run what we believe is genetics. We created what we call functional genomics. Just like medicine is, the doctor will tell you what your disease you have and what pill to take, how to manage it. Functional medicine is the doctor will tell you why you got sick. What did you do wrong in your environment, nutrition, and your lifestyle so that we can reverse it? That's the same truth behind functional genomics, which is there aren't 22,000 independent genes. There's systems that we already understand. There's a hormone system. There's neurochemicals of the brain. There's cardiovascular systems, metabolic systems to break down foods. If we first understand the systems, here's how the body works, and we understand which gene instructs every little step. It's not so much about then at that point, this gene is 80% chance of this. It's this gene means you don't do this job well. You don't transport this protein. You don't make this chemical. You don't clear this toxin. If you understand the jobs and you understand that I don't do this specific job well, for example, when we talked about you're missing some key genes to detoxify the gut. So that could come out genetically as you have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. Or we could say, you don't detox at the gut. That job is broken. So now we know what to do. We need to support your gut health. We don't need to support Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a byproduct of bad gut health. So this is the difference between genetics, which is the disease-centric thinking,
Yeah.
or functional genomics, which is the system-based thinking. What job is not happening? Now I know in environment, nutrition, and lifestyle what habits I should have to get me to my goal.
And in your, I don't know the answer to this. Is there another company out there doing what you do, or is this unique, the model that you've
Yeah,
created?
so academia has a way of thinking, right? And so genetics, they believe that genetics is the way, the step one, like this gene means this. They don't even think that what we do is possible, right? They don't think there's genetics around Alzheimer's and diabetes and also there's only genetic conditions. There's not chronic diseases that you develop. Those are lifestyle based, quote unquote. Yes, they are lifestyle based, but the choices are different for each one of us. The things that cause them are different. There's not a single cause for breast cancer or dementia. There's multiple causes.
Mm.
So no, they don't think like us, so their reports don't look like ours, right? And here's the big dirty secret. The big dirty secret is that the genetic business is not a great business to be in because your DNA doesn't change. So if I test you, it's for life. That's your code. We don't ever need to test you again. So because of this, most genetic companies became data selling companies. You're paying two, three, four, $500 for a test as a consumer. Your data is being sold for $5,000 or $10,000 in the back end. So who's the real customer in that equation?
Mm.
The person that's paying 10x what you're paying, likely, right? So that test is now designed for them and what they want, which is a mass collection of data, which is not going to give you what you need, which is fix me. Tell me what's wrong and how to fix it. Which is not a bunch like thousands and thousands of genes. It's a curation of the ones that matter.
And that's what you do. So in a nutshell, you can identify using this analysis things that need work, attention, and can lead to prevention potentially of certain
Exactly.
diseases.
And to put it to paint a picture, let me give you an example. So we're dealing literally last night. I was dealing with a woman who's been suffering from PCOS for some time,
Very common.
and she's a friend, so she called me directly. So polycystic ovarian syndrome, being treated at the symptom level. She's now, I think, in her late 30s, and she's had it since she was 19, so 20 years. So she's in pain. She can't handle it anymore. What do I do about this? So we looked at her genetic code and we didn't look for a PCOS gene. That's not the way things work. That's how geneticists think. We're saying what systems are failing. So what did we find? She makes a lot of testosterone. So the hormone cascade, she makes more testosterone than the average woman. She then converts that testosterone into a byproduct called DHT, dihydrotestosterone. And again, the genes make this very clear. This black and white area of female hormone health, which is so underserved in healthcare, it's probably the area that needs the most change and support. It's actually very black and white if you understood it genetically. So, genetically, she makes too much testosterone. She then converts it into DHT, and she does not efficiently convert it into estrogen. So she's what we call androgen dominant. She's
Mm.
more androgenized, more testosterone, and she makes a toxic version. Now there's certain genes that should kick in to help her clear that toxicity she's making. She's missing those genes. In one case, she's missing it, doesn't have it. In the other one, she has a slow version. Makes too much testosterone, does not convert it to estrogen, toxic byproduct, is not equipped to clear it. So she has this constant drip of androgen toxicity every month in her cycle that's causing inflammation, which leads to polycystic ovarian cyst, right? She doesn't have a disease, she has an inflammatory condition that's the outcome of month after month after month after month of toxic drip. So we're now going to deal with that and reverse her condition. We're not dealing with the PCOS, we're dealing with the root cause.
And what might you do in a case like that?
So the solution is so simple. We know, well, I guess it sounds simple, but this is after years of research that we did, right?
Mm.
So in studying those 7,000 people, we worked with different supplementations and foods and exercises to understand, if I take this ingredient, how does it affect your gene expression? Gene expression means she has a fast version of a gene that makes her make too much testosterone, but there's certain supplements you can take that might slow that down. It makes the fast version of the gene slow. We can also open up the valve on her converting the testosterone into more estrogen. So we're truly going to change her hormone cascade with supplementation and food, perhaps even certain exercises. As an example, she doesn't bind her androgens efficiently. So there's another gene that determines how efficiently you use your testosterone. And she's not efficient, which is why too much of it is going into the DHT, because she's not using that. So what do we teach her? A simple trick that if you do stretching of your large muscles, your glutes, your legs, it activates androgen receptors. And now she can use her androgens before converting them into DHT, the toxic version. Simple hack. We are not
Yeah.
telling her to go take a pill for the rest of her life. We're telling her stretch once a day. So there's a combination of environment, nutrition, and lifestyle. These are the three epigenetic areas we always go to: environment, nutrition, lifestyle. And we resolve genetic failures with your epigenetic habits between these three buckets.
What would you say? It's fascinating. What would you say is a potential downside to all of this information? I'm bringing to mind the Jerry Springer show with the paternity tests, when everything changed. Suddenly, you knew your dad wasn't your dad, or mum wasn't your mum,
Yeah.
and obviously there were negatives to a lot of those. What do you think, as somebody who's now very much in the driving seat of this? Where are the areas to watch out for?
So the thing I said earlier about your data being sold, you want
Mm.
to make sure you're not working with a company who's a mass consumer test where it's kind of like an infotainment style product just to collect your data. Avoid those. You don't want your data sold. Um, the other area is these sort of not well thought out reports that tell you propensity based information without an action plan. So you have a 60% chance of breast cancer. Good luck. The BRCA gene, for example, every woman is scared of the BRCA gene. Just about a month ago in the US, there was news coming out that women that have a certain version of the BRCA gene should go cut their fallopian tubes out to avoid ovarian cancer, right? And if you ask the clinicians that signed off on that document what the BRCA gene does, they'll tell you, well, it's cancer risk. No, it's not cancer risk. BRCA is a tumor suppressor. It fixes cancer. What we're saying is if you have the wrong version of BRCA, you don't do a good job of repair.
Mm.
It didn't cause cancer, which was what we're making everybody believe. Something else caused it. You don't do a good job of repair. So your risk of recovery is poor. Why don't we ask what caused it? That's the real question. That's the real thing that women need to be armed with. What caused it? Not cut your fallopian tubes out.
And give me an example potentially of what you would do in a situation like this, because people will be watching this interview, and there are ladies I know. I have a lot of breast cancer survivors and patients who watch, and they'll be saying, "Well, what do you do if you do have the BRCA gene and you don't want to have your fallopian tubes cut
Oh.
out or have a hysterectomy?"
So you need to look at the sources, the causes. And we talked about this woman that was androgen dominant. What if you were the opposite? What if you made way too much estrogen and you were estrogen dominant?
Like me.
Hands up, right?
Yeah,
So we're literally going to lay out your story right
yeah.
now. Estrogen dominant, waking weight, that bucket gets filled every month. And then your estrogen toxic, because estrogen doesn't end at estrogen. Before you have your monthly cycle, you convert it into a metabolite, either 2, 4, or 16 hydroxyestrogen. And we know which genes control those different dials. And some women go into the toxic buckets, 4 and 16. You can raise your hand again, right? That's you.
Hmm.
So estrogen dominant, estrogen toxic. Then we have to look at step 3 of 3. How well do you detoxify that toxin? And there's things like COMT, which we have to look at, which you don't do well. There's things like mitochondrial function we have to look at, you don't do well. Then there's glutathione, which you do kind of okay. Some are doing well, some are doing not so well. So estrogen dominant, estrogen toxic, and not detoxifying it. Put that in a context where now a woman is menopausal, no longer has a menstrual cycle to clear those metabolites, and the body's saying, whoa, this toxic stuff is going to cause me inflammation. I got to protect myself, but I don't have a menstrual cycle. Okay, I'll go store this in fat. And where do women have fat? In their breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And what's in the breast?
Especially if you're a thinner woman as well. It's the only place to
Yes,
go.
only place to go, right? So now you have this toxic metabolite being stored in fat right next to milk ducts and glands for which the cellular structure was not designed to deal with toxins. There are certain parts of your body that are designed to deal with toxins. These are not. So no wonder there's cellular degradation and cell mutation and cancer develops. And guess what? On top of that, how many women will take the birth control pill for 10 or 15 years and add more estrogen to that estrogen fire? How many women will go on to hormone replacement therapy when they get reach menopause and add more estrogen to the estrogen fire? How many women don't understand their hormone disruption in their environment, the chemicals and plastics and foods that are mimicking estrogens as they enter their body, adding more estrogen, fueling that fire? Now you wonder why there's so much breast cancer, right?
Okay,
So it steps, yeah.
this obviously this isn't advice for people, but tell me, what supplements, what would you do? What are you going to do with me? What are we going to discuss? Give me some of the supplements and tools that we might be talking about over the next week or so.
So there's lots of dials to turn. So we talked about your cascade: hormone dominance, hormone toxicity, hormone clearance. All three of those can be worked on. We can say here's certain supplements like DIM, for example, that will slow down that estrogen dominance. Right?
Yeah.
It will. There's a gene called CYP19A1, which takes your testosterone, converts it into estrogen. We can actually slow that gene down. Very healthy. You're going to have more testosterone, which, if we maintain the right levels, is actually beneficial. It speaks to longevity. It speaks to energy and vitality. Right? Or we can clear out the toxins, which again goes to supporting your detox pathway. You have a slow COMT. So let's speed that COMT up and let's get the toxins clearing on their own. You have poor mitochondrial function. Let's support that mitochondrial function, the antioxidation and clearance of these toxins. So the answer should be personalized.
Mm.
The answer should be your answer, not a answer, right? And it's not difficult to do once you have your genome in hand. Here's exactly what my body's doing. Here's the link that's broken. That's exactly what I need to support. And this problem now becomes optional. It's no longer my mom had it, my grandma had it. I hope I don't get it. It's like, why did they get it? What job did their body not do well? Let me go support that job. I don't need to have it. If you want to keep diving deeper with your prescription for life with the Unpilled podcast, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I've also written my first book, The DNA Way: Unlock the Secrets of Your Genes to Reverse Disease, Slow Aging, and Achieve Optimal Wellness. Take a look and enjoy, guys.
Do you feel a different person yourself now after everything you've been through, after this journey of discovery, after this what must be incredibly satisfying? I mean, what you're saying is really groundbreaking, and I think people will be watching this going, this is you're basically unlocking the answers to so many people's health issues here. It's almost unbelievable, Kashif.
Yeah.
How do you cope and feel about this now?
So I don't know how to explain it other than I feel like my consciousness has been elevated and I no longer work. I'm on a mission,
Mm,
you know, and it's hard to explain that unless you felt it yourself. Right? I fear nothing. I get up and I do what I need to do because I understand what the world now needs. And all day long, I'm getting messages on Instagram and emails, and people are like, I can't believe my autistic son does not need to feel this way. I can't believe that my relationship that's falling apart does not need to fall apart, that my depression isn't real,
mm,
right? This is a constant all day long for me now, which even 6 months ago wasn't true because we were a research company, right?
mm.
2 years ago, I was sitting in the background. But as we become more forward, sort of public facing, the stories that we keep hearing over and over and over again. So yeah, my life has completely changed. I've gone from identifying
Hmm.
as an entrepreneur to now identifying as a man on a mission. Like, money is a byproduct of all this. I'm not even concerned about that. It's more like we have to change the way we think about healthcare, and it's so easy to do. It's just a couple dials a turn. We are constantly one step away from good health and one step away from bad health. It's our choices that push us in either direction. And the people that are in bad health, you're so close to good health. You just need to turn a couple dials, and you just need to know what those are.
I know from personal experience, and when I talk about certain things and post certain things and write about certain things, people are very uncomfortable when you tell them that they have to take charge of some things in their
Yeah,
life, their health, and you might mention food or sugar. I've spoken openly. You know, I was addicted to sugar. I definitely consumed
yeah,
too much sugar, which, by the way, we know is super bad for me because of my genetic makeup as well. Um, and then some people go, "Oh, you're shaming me. You're shaming me for my choices, or because I'm slightly overweight, or." How do we get over that hurdle of making people understand that this is actually empowering and not finger pointing?
yeah. Well, what's your priority? The people that are shamed, is your priority, you know, is it health? Then you need to start working on and understanding that health is not responding to illness. That's not health. Health is not getting sick. And first of all, understanding that it is optional, not something that's innate. There's things that you have. You know, there's genetic conditions you're born with. The vast majority of our healthcare budget is spent on chronic disease, which you do not need to have. And when something like shaming because of sugar, there's simple science. A cancer cell has 50 times the sugar receptors of a normal cell.
Hmm.
It's just straight logic. If you give sugar to your bloodstream, you're giving fuel to cancer, right? So, yeah, pull it out. If you do not metabolize starch, which we've seen in your genetics to be true, then you're fueling yourself with a fuel that your body doesn't align with. So there's basic logical science to stuff, but it's also what's your priority? If your priority is how you feel about what somebody's saying, okay, then that's going to be a priority. You may not ever get over, thinking about taking charge of your own health and being your own quarterback. If your priority is your health, if you're not going to wait to get sick to react, if you're going to believe that you can actually change your health trajectory and you can play with your grandchildren instead of watching them from a chair, that you can be there for your children instead of them being there for you and taking care of you in your old age. If those are the choices you want, then start working. And you have to start working because health is not a task. Somebody said something brilliant the other day. They said health doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. Meaning it's not a thing that happened overnight, it's a constant lifestyle choice.
It's
You
habits.
have to do the work. Yeah, it's habits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does I guess this is going to be a two-pronged answer. How does the medical world react to you? So there'll be
Mhm.
traditional medicine, Western medicine, which is treating sickness, and then we've
Yeah.
mentioned this functional medicine world, and people might not know what functional medicine doctors are, but I think you've explained it pretty well. It's this new vanguard of doctors who are looking at root cause, not just looking at illness. How do both of
Yeah.
those sectors react to you? Because as you said, you're not a doctor, you're not a scientist, you're
Yeah.
self-taught. Where do you fit in?
Oh, there's been a big change pre and post COVID. So pre was when we started our research in 2017, and I could not speak to an allopathic healthcare doctor without getting poo-pooed on. Like, it's not what do you have to tell me, it's who are you?
Mm.
Right? It was more important who I was than what information I had, and that scared the bejesus out of me
Mm.
because, like, how do these people think, right? And so, and I because I didn't come from that world, I didn't understand that ego and insecurity are the drivers, and those ego and insecurities are indoctrinated to protect the industry. Right now, that being said, post COVID, when people saw how fragile we are, right, and how much health can be optional if we made the right choices, there's been a major shift because the clients are now demanding it of their doctors. So now every week I'm speaking at some kind of medical event to a room full of doctors who are saying, "Why weren't we taught this in school?"
Mm.
They now want the tools. They just don't know where to get them. Right?
Dr.
So it's literally. Sorry?
Dr. Peter Attia says quite often that he probably uses about 20% of the information that he learned in medical school now. Maybe. There's
Yeah.
so much other
Yeah.
stuff to learn about now. We've everything has changed so much in the last, even the last 5 years, but certainly the last 10, 20 years. That
Yes.
that and there's that great joke about in medical school, what do you call the student that came last in medical school, that failed, got the least, the lowest results in medical school? Doctor.
Yeah.
Because they all get
Yeah,
through.
exactly. Yeah. So now that all being said, the original intention is I want to heal people.
Hmm.
They've just been given the wrong toolkit. It's a reactionary toolkit, and they don't know that there's another toolkit available. But so much more now today, ever than before, there's this awakening, and they know. And they're sick of what they're doing, which is just managing disease with more and more pills and more and more pills and more and more pills. It's like, why can't I reverse this stuff? And they're seeing the stories. And the other big thing that's happening, people like Peter, like you mentioned, and other podcasts and YouTube shows are talking loud and clear, and you can't ignore it anymore.
Mm.
Right, the access to information is there, and there's so many great healing stories, even though they're anecdotal, they're very clear and evident, and you can't ignore it anymore. And people are demanding this of their clinicians.
Mm. Do you think people are willing to make the changes? Do you think people have the staying power, and do they have the resilience? Because sometimes it's hard when you say to people, you know what, you need to stop drinking, you need to stop eating sugar, you
Yeah.
need to cut out the pasta and the pizza, you need to overhaul your diet, you need to be outside walking every day, you need to get daylight. When you mount it all up like that, when you stack it, it seems like a lot. I know we've talked about it, there's
Yeah.
smaller changes, their habits, but how confident are you that we can do this, that humankind has it in them?
So I have personally done genomic reviews with many hundreds of people, and I do this because I learn from it. I love doing it,
Mm,
right? Um, and what I've seen over and over and over again is I meet people that kind of knew they needed to change something. Why did they get a genetic test? Why did they come to me, right? They're kind of on that path. They weren't quite there, which is why they're looking for more. But when they hear it empirically, your body doesn't do this job. You need to do this, or this is what's going to happen. They adopt the habit. The challenge has been this sort of woo woo, eat like this, exercise like this. Like, I don't really understand why. That's where people are stuck. They want to know why, and they're not told why,
mm,
right? And so once they understand the why, that your body doesn't metabolize vitamin D well. Here's the gene that converts D2 from the sun into D3. So you need to take 5,000 IU a day. It's empirical and scientific and hard to deny, and they start doing it. That's what I have seen. And this is where testing, whether it's genetic testing or any other functional testing, lays it out so clearly. It's hard to deny, and people are much more willing to do the work.
Tell me very briefly the story of your niece. Not giving away too much personal stuff, but it was a simple fix, and it's not about cancer. It's not about something. I think it's a good story for people to hear as a general health. This is how stuff can be fixed.
Yeah, and that story I call out in our book very specifically, because that was the turning point when we went from being a research company to wow, we need to change the world company. Like, it was a light bulb that went off,
Mm.
right? And so yeah, the book, there's a whole section where we're telling that thing in the beginning. So what happened is this young girl lives with my mother and my sister, and my mom's texting me while I'm on a call like this, and I'm ignoring the call because I'm in a call, and she's saying there's something wrong with your niece. So I get over there, and it sounded like an anxiety attack, and I called a friend of mine who's a pediatrician, and I said she's breathing like this. She's acting. He's like, yeah, it's an anxiety attack. This is very common with young ladies of that age. She was 13. If it happens again, let me know. Sounds like she's getting over it. So sometime later, my mother calls me again, screaming, "Get over here." It happened again, but she fell and she hurt herself, and we think she may have broken her leg. She can't walk. Okay. So I take her to the clinic, call my pediatrician friend. He gets us in, and we spend a good 6 hours on blood testing, x rays, all this stuff. And the end result was If it happens again, let us know.
Hmm.
And at that time, I knew what that meant. What that meant is if it happens again, she's getting diagnosed with an anxiety problem, and we're going to tell you what pill she has to take.
And also
And I thought,
it probably means we don't really know what it is right now as well.
yeah, yeah, we don't know, right?
Mm.
So I realized at that point, whoa, I have to dip into her genetics and figure out what's going on. Take her home, drop her off, went back to work, and like guilty of being like any other busy entrepreneur, I didn't do it. I didn't look at her genetics. So my mom calls me again and says, your niece has run away from home. And if you have met this girl, completely out of character, sweet, innocent girl, she doesn't leave the house by herself,
Mm.
by her own choice, right? Ran away. So I said, we know her. She hasn't run away. She's probably down the street or something. So I drive over there, and literally, she's literally a block away, standing outside the building. And I pick her up. I was like, tell me, what is it? Is it a boy? Is it social media? Like, what is happening? Why do you feel this way? And she didn't know. She was running away from the space, from the feeling. She needed to get out and escape the feeling. And so literally right there, I picked up my phone. In my email, I had her genetic report from like a year ago. And I open it up. And again, I'm not looking for an anxiety gene. I'm
Mm.
looking for, what are the red flags? What jobs does her body not do well? The first red flag is her hormone cascade. In the beginning of the menstrual cycle, your hormones are at their lowest point. She has this ultra deep dip. So it's much lower than the typical woman, right? So it's already mood and behavior dysregulating, right? So then my question was, well, why now? Because this wasn't her first month of her cycle.
Mm.
And by the way, I then checked the calls and texts from my mothers, and like clockwork, they were having monthly, right? So directly. So I then asked my mother, what part of her cycle was she in? I didn't want to ask her and embarrass her, right? So my mom said, you know what, you're right. It was exactly at the beginning, which was that time when you have that dip with the low hormones, right? So why then did it happen now when she already had her cycle for some time before that? Well, this happened in peak COVID in the winter in Toronto, where she was being homeschooled for a good 5 months. She hadn't been outside,
Wow.
which means zero vitamin D,
Yes, nothing, no daylight, nothing in the eyes.
no daylight, right? So I looked at her vitamin D cascade. Her ability to convert vitamin D2 from the sun to D3 is the worst possible.
Like me.
Her ability, yeah, and her ability to then transport it to the cell is the worst possible. Her ability to bind it to the cell is the worst possible. So she's already a zero, slim to none vitamin D metabolizer. Now put her indoors for 5 months where she has no exposure. Put these two together, system failure, right? Now, why did it express as an anxiety issue? Like her psychopath uncle, she has a horrible dopamine pathway. So she's already teetering on the world sucks.
Mm.
She's already treating on nothing gives me satisfaction and joy, right? Put her neurochemical state on top of this hormonal imbalance, and it's a complete system failure. So in that third bout of she ran away from home, I finally worked on it myself, which I should have earlier. I did two things. I could have done a third thing. I could have given her birth control pill to manage her hormone levels. I said, let me work on something else first because I don't want to go there. Right. So what did I do? I gave her L-theanine to boost her dopamine levels. Supplement that you can get from any health food store.
Yep.
I gave her high dose vitamin D, 10,000 IU, but I split it because remember, she doesn't transport and bind it. So whatever I give her, she doesn't utilize all of it. She uses a portion of it. So I gave her 3 doses of vitamin D, adding up to 10,000 IU. This problem never happened again. It's been 2 years. She did not have an anxiety problem. She did not have a mental health problem. She had a genetic misalignment to her epigenetic habit problem. Her being locked indoors with no vitamin D, with a bad hormone cycle, with no dopamine boost. That was the problem. Right? And so we unlocked this, and that was the moment for me. I was like, wow, how many young girls out there are on anxiety pills and birth control pills and taking all this stuff trying to feel good when they're probably just wired like her. And that's when we went from being a research company to like, I need to get this in everybody's hands.
Well, Kashif, you've certainly inspired me. I mean, I've been fascinated by your story ever since I first heard you being interviewed, and it's been fantastic to connect with you. And I hope that we will continue it because I think you're doing an incredible job. And I'm genuinely, I'm one of those people that thinks you are. I know you are changing the world, and I think it's the way to look at medicine and healing from now on. So thanks for talking to me today, and we shall continue this. And if people need to, if the people can listen to you on the Unpilled podcast, which is brilliant, and follow you on Instagram, which I love because you basically post what I want to post every day about there's plastic in the salt. We shouldn't be eating the fish. They're poisoning us again. But we're going to meet very soon as well in London, which I can't
Yeah, yeah.
wait. And you're going to be talking to a packed conference of the medical world. And I know that they're going to respond so positively to you. So thank you very, very much for your time today and sharing all these incredible stories.
It's a pleasure. Great to talk to you. And finally, and I'll see you in person. So it'll be good to see you there.
Yeah.